episode 31 of the Daily Geeky Pastimes podcast, where we talk about all the things that I've been playing, we talk about gaming news, and we always have a topic of the day. And today's topic is who is the best villain in gaming? I was thinking the other day of some, topics to talk about for this, and I thought, oh yeah, that'd be a good one. And then I suddenly realized I couldn't really think of many villains. I couldn't remember many villains. I could think of loads of games where I have no idea who the villain is. So I thought that's kind of an interesting thing in itself. Like, why don't we have many good villains in games? So that's kind of the thing that I want to talk about later today. But before that, I'll very quickly talk to you about the podcast. I record it here, youtube.com/Geeky Pastimes, every weekday morning at 9 a.m. You can watch it live, you can get involved in the chat, let me know your thoughts, and we discuss them as we go through. And then if you want to watch the VOD, you can watch it on YouTube. All of the past 30 episodes are up here on YouTube. Or if you want to listen to the audio, it's available as a podcast on things like Spotify, iTunes, Google Play, all of that good stuff. If you want to help me out, don't forget to like and subscribe, follow if you're on Spotify and stuff like that. And if you really, really want to help out, come over to YouTube and become a member. It's from $1.99 a month, but those memberships kind of keep this going. Like, that's the money that keeps me doing this every day. So if you want to become a member, if you want to support the channel, I would very much appreciate it. But let's get on with what we want to talk about. First of all, I kind of want to make this a more regular section of the podcast, but what I've been playing. So what was I playing yesterday? I'm someone who plays a lot of games. As I don't just mean like, oh, I play Call of Duty for 10 hours a day. I play like lots of different games as I go through, and because I only stream a handful of them, I think a lot of people don't quite sort of like realize the sort of scope of games I play. So I think this is quite a nice thing to talk about in the podcast. Just talking about those other games that maybe I don't stream, maybe I haven't made a video of, that sort of thing. Because, it's always good to get video game recommendations from people who play a lot of games, people who have access to a lot of games. So yesterday, I played a little bit of the Layers of Fear demo. And I say a little bit, I played the entire demo. But I played it, it's only a little bit of the game. It doesn't take very long. It's like less than an hour long. But I really enjoyed it. It's an Unreal Engine 5 game. It's a reboot for the Layers of Fear series. It's like a horror game, but there's not really any kind of stealthing. And I've talked before on this about how I like the idea of horror games, but I don't like the stealth mechanics normally. I don't want to just be hiding, and then when it gets difficult to have to rely on trial and error to find a path around. I want a horror game where it's more like a Ghost Train. I want to move through an environment, maybe solve some puzzles and stuff like that, but get scared in a creepy environment. And that's exactly what Layers of Fear is. And the demo is really good. I'm going to upload like the full gameplay of that demo today on YouTube. So if you want to check it out, I will put that up in slightly higher quality than it was on Twitch, so you can see what it looks like. Because it's Unreal Engine 5, and it does look very nice. And it does a few kind of interesting things with graphics that I think it does because it's on Unreal Engine 5. Like, I've seen a lot of Unreal Engine 5 games and like tech demos and things like that, where they just look like normal games but slightly prettier. This, I would say, does some stuff that maybe wouldn't have been possible or wouldn't have been easy on other engines, and that makes it kind of cool. There's some really cool lighting effects. It's very atmospheric, and I really like that. So yeah, Layers of Fear was a success. And then speaking of successes, because we've got quite a positive podcast today, really, Lego 2K Drive. This is a game that 2K UK were kind enough to give me a key for. It comes out on Friday. But I'd seen trailers for it, and I thought, oh, that looks kind of cool. Like, I'd like to give it a go. I like Lego stuff. I like racing games. I'll give it a go. And my God, this game's good. Like, seriously, incredibly good. Like, to the point where, for the rest of the day, I haven't really decided if I'm going to stream today or what I'm going to stream. And I was thinking, do I want to play some Warzone Ranked? Do I want to play some DMZ? Do I want to play some Zelda? I've got all of these great games that I could play. Then I was like, I kind of want to play some more Lego 2K Drive, to be honest. So, for anyone who doesn't know what it is, it's if you think, like, I was trying to describe it to Jack Frags last night, and I was saying it's kind of like Forza Horizon plus Burnout Takedown plus Diddy Kong Racing, and then with a little bit of kind of DNA from other games as well in there. So there's like every now and then you'll do something and be like, oh, this is a bit like The Crew, or this is a bit like Mario Kart, or whatever. And it's like, it is its own thing, and it just takes ideas from a lot of those games, and it takes some of the feeling from those games and mashes them together into something that's really, really cool, like really fun. And, you drive around, and it's a sort of a set of open worlds rather than one big open world, which means that they can have very different environments. you drive around, you can do little quests and things like that, or you can go do races. You don't really have to do the quests, it seems. You can go do races. There's a few little challenges and things like that. You can explore and find collectibles. Your vehicle will turn into, like, you have a street car, an off-road car, and a boat, and it just sort of transforms as soon as you hit, like, the other thing. So if you drive off the road, you'll just immediately turn into your off-road car. And if you drive into water, you'll immediately turn into your boat. And it's quite a cool thing where it looks like your car's being, like, taken apart and remade into the thing that you're doing. And then the customization, which I haven't really played with that much, is literally like you use Lego pieces to make your car. So, you know, you have access to what looks like basically all of the normal Lego pieces, like maybe not the special ones, but all of the normal ones. And then you can create a car using those pieces. And I don't know how it all works with stats and things like that. I haven't really played with it too much, but that just seems insane. Like, hey, do you want to make an X-Wing car? Do you want to make a car that's just your face? Do you want to make a car that is Big Ben? Like, why not? Just go for it. Like, just knock yourself out. It just seems like crazy deep. So that seems really fun. I've only played the campaign so far. Like I said, it doesn't come out till Friday, so I haven't dipped into multiplayer or anything like that. I think maybe there's, like, if you pre-order it and there's like some fancy edition, maybe you can get access today. But yeah, it's definitely worth playing. If you look at a video of that game and you think that looks like my kind of thing, then it's definitely your kind of thing. It feels really good. The handling's really good. The races feel really good. They do a good kind of rubber banding thing where if you mess up, the front runners will kind of slow down to let you catch up a little bit. And if you're doing really well, the enemy will keep up with you. So you're constantly kind of in the mix, like Mario Kart does. I just think it does basically everything right. I can't really fault that game. Like, I can't think of something where I'm like, oh, I wish they did this. It just all seems super solid. And things like there's damage. So, like, as you're driving, people might smash into you and a bit of your car will fall off. But because it's Lego, it's like just the pieces fall off and you're kind of exposed sitting on, like, you know, a panel connected to some wheels. It just, oh, it looks so good. I really, really enjoyed that game. I feel like I had a grin on my face the whole time playing it. Maybe because I went straight from Layers of Fear to Lego 2K Drive. Maybe it was like I was a bit scared of Layers of Fear, and then Lego 2K Drive made me happy, so that was good. I've also been playing a bit of DMZ yesterday. Like, me and Flynn finished sort of DMZ. We finished the Redacted Tier 5 mission, which was a bit of a disappointment, Red Smoke, just because it's probably the easiest mission in the Redacted faction. It's like a super easy mission. You go to Ashiko Island, you grab some flares, you go to Koshai Complex, a new map, and you put the flares in, like, front of the airlocks. It would be more interesting if you had to put them inside the airlock, so you had to open the airlocks, because you can do that, because then you'd have to be coming up against a team of players each time you did that. That would be kind of interesting and require some planning, but the way it is, it's just super easy. And because there was two of us, we only actually had to do it at two airlocks, so we could just, like, put two down at ours, and then we went to one other airlock and put two down there, and then it completed it. I just think, like, it's a weird anticlimax, and it's kind of symptomatic of one of the things I think is a bit wrong with DMZ at the moment, and I think it will get fixed. But while DMZ is a beta, I feel like everything's a little bit disorganized. You know, like, the rewards for things don't make sense. The rewards aren't themed to what you're doing. So, like, you know, you get the Building 21 weapon case and you get a heavier helicopter skin that's nothing to do with Building 21, or you get, like, a dog charm or something. Like, all of that stuff doesn't make sense. A lot of the time, the tier 5 mission rewards are, like, really basic weapon skins and operate skins that, again, aren't themed to the thing. I feel like when DMZ is kind of done, or when DMZ is, like, ready to go, they'll do a pass on rewards and, you know, you'll get proper rewards. I wouldn't be surprised if whenever it comes out of beta, they, like, do another refresh where, you know, you lose everything, you lose all your mission progress, you lose everything you've got, except for those people that have bought pay-to-win stuff. But you lose everything else. And then when they do that refresh, then they put in, like, the rewards. You know, then you get a load of, if you're doing Black Mouse missions, you get Black Mouse themed rewards. If you're doing Redacted missions, you get Redacted themed rewards. I assume that's what they're going to do, and that would make a lot of sense. So maybe just while they're doing the beta, they're just giving us a load of these rubbish rewards that are just kind of, I assume that when they do it, it's a bit like a band making an album, that they probably make a load of assets. They make a load of cosmetics, so the stickers, emblems, charms, operator skins, gun skins, all of that kind of stuff. Like, you know, a musician making an album, and they make it, like, they record a bunch of songs, and then they go through and in Call, like, how a musician would put all of their best songs on their album. In Call of Duty, I reckon they put all of the best cosmetics in bundles, And then they have like a bargain bin kind of thing. They've just got a load of stuff that's left, like B-sides. And they're like, oh, okay, well, like we need 5 rewards for this weapon case. So let's just whack those in. Like whatever they are, it doesn't matter what they are, just whack them in. I kind of think that's what's happening because it just doesn't make sense to stuff that you get for rewards. So I assume a lot of that's going to happen in DMZ, and a lot of kind of the order of the missions will change. You know, now they've seen people doing them and they've seen which ones are easy, which ones are hard, which ones are more interesting. You know, they'll do another pass of taking out a lot of the less interesting ones and the more annoying ones and the bugged ones, and then you know, ordering it so the easy ones are at the beginning and the hard ones are at the end. That's kind of what they did with the last time they did a complete reset, and I don't think that'll be the last one. I think we'll see another one for when the game comes out of beta, which I hope is this year. I did see someone saying, I think Jack Frags was saying, like, is this it? Do you think this is it for DMZ? Like, is Koshai Complex the final thing we'll see this year for DMZ? And I kind of don't think so. I think they will keep on adding a couple of things. I still, in my heart, feel like there's something big to DMZ that we haven't seen yet. Like some system, something like Tarkov's base, something like some other progression system. When I spoke to that mission designer and he said, you know, that the goal is that the missions are just an extra thing you do, but they're not the main thing. I really hope that there is something else that is the main thing, and then, you know, the missions are an extra thing on top. And then when they release that, it'll be like, you know, another bit of testing and stuff. And then once everything's kind of in place, but a bit rough, then they'll do a big kind of reset to reboot, and we'll be good to go. You know, it'll be like a good quality experience that they've had players testing and stuff like that. So that's what my hope is for DMZ. Maybe they'll just never do anything to it again. Who knows? And then Warzone Ranked. We played a bit of Warzone Ranked last night. We had a good time. We won a game in Warzone Ranked. That was a nice feeling. Although it was a bit disappointing to see, you know, we won a game in Warzone Ranked and still got less SR than when B. Breadman, I was watching him. He won a game and they won a game and they were in the top 250. Oh no, they didn't win, I think. They came like 3rd or 2nd or something. And they were in the top 250. But they just got like so many kills and stuff like that. Even though they lose like 100 points before they go into the game, they were still getting more points than us. Just because we just didn't get many kills. You know, me, Flynn, and Colt were playing. I think we won it, and I had 6 kills, and that was the most. It's an interesting thing that Warzone Ranked. I like it. I like how it makes you carry on want to play. I feel like with the losing SR, I probably would get stressed about that. I feel like I'd probably start feeling like, hey, I don't want to play Warzone Ranked with this person because when I play with this person, they don't do very well. And that means that we'll probably lose SR, so I'll lose some of my rank. And that's like a bad mindset to be in, I think, for me. I get why they do it. Like, it makes perfect sense. It's a competitive thing. You need people to go up and down ranks. And like, I quite like the way they've set up the SR and everything like that. It's just me personally. I can kind of imagine maybe working my way up to gold. And if I get to gold, probably not wanting to play much anymore because I'd be scared of dropping back down. But we'll see how it goes. I'm playing it for fun now. I'm having a laugh. I need a proper team. Like, I need a regular team. You know, I can't play with Cobb all the time because he's working a lot of the time during the day. You know, Flynn's available at the moment, but I need a third person because playing with randoms kind of sucks and is a bit bugged at the moment. So if there's someone out there who's in the EU and is pretty good at Warzone and is an adult and doesn't mind being on Discord to talk, then, you know, let me know. We need some more people. We need some more people to play with. And it's like all the people who I used to play Warzone with, like Tactical Brit and Jaff and Broken and that lot, I can't really play with them anymore because now it's ranked. It's a bit more serious. I don't want to cost some SR by messing up. And, you know, Jaff and that lot are all in like Diamond or whatever. I'm not going to be able to keep up with that. So it's kind of like, it's almost put a barrier between me and a lot of the people I used to play Warzone with, which is a little bit of a shame. But oh well. It is what it is. Hopefully I'll be able to find some new people to play with. Right, let's move on to the news of the day. There's quite a lot of news today, actually. There's quite a lot of things that have been announced or quite a lot of things that have just been hopping on. So, Europe approves Activision Microsoft deal. The Europe version of the CMA, the European version of CMA, has approved it. They've said they've put in some kind of constraint of Microsoft has to make sure any Activision games that they put on cloud streaming services have to be available to everyone to license for free, apparently. So it's like, you know, those companies, I'm guessing, will still, they'll sell the games to license. Like, they'll be able to sell the games, But I guess Microsoft, I don't know how they work it out. Like, how does Microsoft get a cut of that? How do they organize what that cut is? What about streaming services like PS Now, where like you pay a subscription and get a load of games? I don't really know how that would work. But I'm sure it's in the details of it. I haven't read a document or anything like that. But they've agreed it. So that means that now the next thing is the FTC in America is taking it to court to see if they can stop it. People seem to be quite skeptical of whether the FTC can do anything to stop it. They think the courts will probably side with Microsoft. So that would leave just the UK as the one place that said it wasn't okay to go ahead. I don't know enough about this kind of business to know like what's going to happen based on that. My like gut instinct as someone that doesn't know anything is Microsoft will just stop cloud streaming in the UK. They'll just be like, oh well, okay, we'll pull out of the cloud streaming market in the UK. Game Pass won't include cloud streaming anymore. xCloud won't be available anymore in the UK. And then the deal will go ahead. I think like this, the EU going like approving it is kind of, to me, a sign that this deal is going to go ahead. It'll take a long while, obviously, to get through the CMA appeals thing and the FTC courts and everything. But I think it will happen. Like, I'd be surprised if it didn't end up happening now. I just think it's going to be very slow, and potentially the UK is going to get removed from that. I hope it isn't something drastic, like Microsoft are just like, oh, okay, well, we're not going to do Game Pass in the UK or something. That would suck. Because bear in mind, you know, the UK isn't that big of a market, really. It's like, there's a lot of people that play Xbox, to be fair. But in the grand scheme of things, there's not that many people that live here compared to like Europe and Asia and America. So I can imagine like there being some kind of, okay, we just won't do this in that country to appease those regulators or whatever. They know, would that still be worth it for the amount of money that Microsoft could be making from Call of Duty elsewhere? Would it balance it? And I assume it probably would. You know, even in the UK, if in the UK they did do what I was saying and say, okay, we're just going to make it so if you're in the UK, you can't use xCloud, like you don't have access to it. The power users, the people who really care about it, will just use VPN, so they'll still be able to use it anyway. And normal people who use Game Pass, I don't think even know that xCloud is a thing. I don't think many people use it. I don't think many people are really aware that it's a thing, except for people who are like super into tech. So I don't think it would actually affect many people. Maybe I don't know whether VPNs would mess up streaming, maybe because it would increase latency. I don't really know, but yeah. So that's happening. You know, it's a positive step towards that deal getting approved, and I kind of want that deal to be approved because selfishly, I want all of the Call of Duty and Blizzard games to be on Game Pass. I think that would be cool, but we'll see where it goes from there. I'm sure there'll be plenty more news about this over the rest of the year. So the next one, this is some sad news actually. Vampire the Masquerade Blood Hunt ends development, but the servers are going to stay on. And this kind of sucks. But, you know, it makes sense. Blood Hunt, for anyone who doesn't know, was a third-person vampire battle royale game set in Prague. You played as a vampire. You could, like, climb up walls, run across rooftops, use machine guns and stuff like that. But also you had some vampiric powers, depending on what class you were. It was really cool. Like, it was a really cool game. I really enjoyed playing it in the alpha. But then I kind of just dropped off. It was one of those things where it's like, I did enjoy it, but then I kind of dropped off a bit. And then when I tried to get back into it when they brought out the full release, other people were super good at the game. You know, it's one of those things where the people that didn't drop off, the people that just kept on playing, got really, really good. And because the number of people playing it was so low, whenever you played a game, you were always up against those people. You know, it's like, imagine if you played Battle Royale, and every time you dropped into a game, you were up against like Huskers and Symphony and B. Breadman and FIFA kills. It's like very quickly you'd just stop playing because you'd just be cannon fodder for those people. And that's kind of what it felt like in Blood Hunt. So I just stopped playing, which obviously, again, lowering the player count made the whole problem worse. And I think that's been kind of ongoing basically for the entire time that Blood Hunt's been out in the proper version, you know, since it properly released. It's just been constantly like hemorrhaging players. You know, that's a joke on Blood. Like right now, I can see on Blood Hunt at the moment there's 498 people online, which you know isn't the worst numbers on Steam. Like there are a lot of games that are worse, but from a peak of 30,000, it just really dropped, and it's crazy how quickly they dropped. Like if I just put on the screen, you can see here So that was when it was in its like alpha type thing when they did their testing, and then it dropped off down to down there. I don't think you could actually play it then. So that I assume is like developers playing it. But anyway, so that was a time when I don't think you could play it for a bit. And then they did like a big release, like they actually released a game, and it got up to 29,000 people playing, which for a new IP, small studio that people didn't really know about, that seemed really cool. And then it dropped down to like 1,000 people, and it's basically been there ever since, between 1,000 and 2,000 people. And those 1,000, 2,000 people are really, really good at the game, just like really good. And also, when you've got like an audience of 1,000, 2,000 people for a free-to-play game, you don't have an audience that's big enough to support microtransactions and battle passes and stuff like that. It's like it's just not going to be feasible to keep that going, I don't think. So they got rid of it, I guess. They ended up shutting it. Well, they're not shutting it down. They're not shutting the servers down. They're just saying they're not going to make new things for it, because I guess it's not really worth keeping developers on it. It's a shame. It's a sort of thing that, happens to a lot of these games. It was a really cool, interesting, unique game. I do always grizzle a little bit when you hear people saying things like, oh, there's no new unique games, there's no new IPs, everything's just a copy, everything's just like doing the same thing. And it's like, did you play Blood Hunt? Did you give Blood Hunt a go? Because that was super unique, that was super innovative, doing something really different, and then you didn't want to play it. And it's the same kind of thing, you look at things like Splitgate and Quantum League and Hyperscape, and even, some of the bigger games that kind of made it, like For Honor and Riders Republic. There's loads of new IPs. There's loads of new innovative games that are quite different, games that are trying something new, coming out all the time. But a lot of people just want to play the next Call of Duty, the next Far Cry, the next Assassin's Creed, the next FIFA. That's the reason why a lot of these games don't survive. It's not because people aren't being creative and they aren't coming up with new ideas, and studios aren't funding these new ideas, or publishers aren't funding these new ideas. They 100% are. It's just gamers seem very reluctant to give them a go. And like I said, I'm guilty of that too. I played a bit of Blood Hunt and then kind of bounced off it after a while, which really sucked. So yeah, that was a bit sad news to see that that's closing down, but not entirely surprised. But talking about basically the exact opposite of that happening, Hawken is coming back. Hawken is like an arcadey mech game that came out, I think it was mostly made by one person, which was crazy. But it's a really fast mech game. You're in a robot, you're going around this like futuristic city, destroying other players. And they've decided to bring that game back, but as a PvE game. And this is something that I talked about a little bit the other day that I think is going to be a trend. I think when people are saying like, what's going to be the next big genre? What's going to be like the next big thing in gaming? I genuinely think it's going to be more co-op PvE experiences, more things where players can play together, because then everyone gets to win. Everyone gets to feel like they're winning, rather than a PvP Battle Royale game where out of 150 people, like 4 people get to feel like they're winning. So yeah, I think that this is going to be a trend of games coming back, almost like the opposite of what happened with Save the World. Save the World started off as a co-op experience, and then they changed it to being Fortnite Battle Royale, and moved it to the PvP side. I think we're going to see a lot of like pushback against that now, and we're going to see a lot of kind of interesting co-op PvE experiences. But lots of people are saying they want to play DMZ without other players. They want to see play DMZ just against bots. I think we're going to see a bit of a resurgence in that. But yeah, Hawken coming back to PvE game, and you don't have long to wait. It's going into early access this week, so you're going to be able to play that if you want to. Hawken's a really cool looking game. They did a lot of really interesting stuff with like procedural generation to make the city, like I said, I think it was made by one person originally, to make the city look super like detailed. And if you look closely, it was just, lots of pieces organized together in different ways to give the impression of variety. But it worked, and it looked really, really cool. It was a really cool looking game. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if that manages to find an audience. I'm not sure it will, because I don't think Hawken was ever that popular. But I hope that there's more stuff like this happening, where games that maybe didn't work out very well the first time, coming back and trying a PvE thing. Overwatch is doing the same thing. Overwatch bringing out a PvE experience at some point. I genuinely think this is the beginning of a trend, a sort of move away from PvP. You think like so much online toxicity is to do with PvP, and so much of like the problems with balancing and the problems with cheating and glitches and all of that sort of thing so much of that just doesn't really exist in PvE or isn't such a big problem in PvE. I think that's going to happen. By the way, for anyone who's wondering, PvE means player versus enemy. So like when you're just playing against a computer, PvP means player versus player. I just realized I keep saying that, and I'm sure there's some people who probably don't know what it means. Then Amazon New World isn't another news story. The Amazon New World developers, so the people who made New World, which for whatever you think about it, New World was a big success. Like New World did incredibly well for Amazon. The idea of bringing out a new MMO in the last few years just seems insane. Like that seems like something where if you said anyone was going to try it, you'd be like, well, that's going to fail. Because there was a spate, someone might not remember, there was a spate of new MMOs coming out. Like after the success of World of Warcraft, lots of people were like, hey, that looks like awesome. We should definitely try and get on that. And there was loads of big companies started trying to work on MMOs to get something going. So you had things like Rift and Terra and Warhammer Age of Reckoning. There was some like sci-fi type one that was, it looked really cool and it was the abilities were kind of fun, but that didn't stick around very long. Everyone was playing as like kind of half animal creatures. Anyone remember in chat what that was called? I can't remember that one. But I mean, I played it a bunch. There was City of Heroes, City of Villains, DC Universe Online, Matrix Online. There was so many, just like so many MMOs popped up. And I really enjoyed them. You know, Final Fantasy 11 as well and Final Fantasy 14. I really enjoyed having lots of new MMOs to play. Like, I love starting a new MMO and like discovering a world and all that sort of thing. But people quickly realized that there just wasn't enough audience to support lots of them. Oh, Star Wars The Old Republic, Star Wars Galaxies, they were great. Yeah, there wasn't enough audience to support lots of these, I don't think. You know, you needed, because of the insane development costs of an MMO and the fact that they had to run as a live service, lots of people going, you had to have a lot of people playing and paying a subscription or buying microtransactions. And I just think it got saturated that, you know, people found one they liked. A lot of people were super into EverQuest or super into World of Warcraft or super into Star Wars Galaxies, and they weren't going to go anywhere. They weren't going to change over. And that was like a real shame. Like that was a real kind of, for me at least, you know, when people realized that, hey, every single one of these MMOs is failing after a few months, they sort of, you know, people stopped doing it. And since then, there's still been the idea that a couple of companies have still gone for it. So in Asia, especially, you know, you've had things like Genshin Impact and Black Desert Online that have managed to do pretty well for themselves. I mean, Genshin Impact is insanely popular, but there's not been as many. It's not been as flooded. And then New World came out, and it's like a Western MMORPG, very much in the style of World of Warcraft, came out, and it just like blew a lot of people away. Like, I don't know how well it's doing now, New World, but I don't think it completely died out, did it? Or maybe actually, I'm looking at it on Steam and I'm struggling to find it, which makes me think it did in fact die out. I mean, Black Desert Online's only got 11,000 people, but that's on console too. Let's have a look. New World, how did it do? Oh, New World's on 9,000 people, down from a peak of 913,000 people. It's got 1% of its player base left. And, you know, this, unlike when we look at Call of Duty on Steam charts, that's like pretty bad. I mean, actually, I'm just looking at it on Steam. Oh, no, wrong one. That one. I'm looking on Steam charts, and yeah, like that is much worse than I thought. The fall off of players is way more dramatic than I thought. They had such a cool launch. They got loads and loads of streamers involved. They got them all to set up their clans. They had like clans taking over servers, like trying to fight against each other and stuff. It was very, very cool. But then the problem with New World for a lot of people was that there just wasn't an end game. Like there wasn't anything interesting to do once you hit max level. The PvP wasn't interesting enough, wasn't balanced enough to keep people's attention. So yeah, like that player drop off where in October 2021 had 913,000 people, and then by what, February, so in 4 months it dropped down to 34,000. Yeah, no end game. So that was a big problem. I didn't realize how badly that dropped off, to be honest. That's pretty shocking. But yeah, so New World, successful launch apparently, but not so successful game. But now those developers are working on a Lord of the Rings MMO. And it makes sense that they won't stick with New World, because if the player base is that small, again, what's the point? Like, they can't sustain it. But they're working on a Lord of the Rings MMO. Feels a bit strange to me, because Lord of the Rings Online exists and was super good. Like, Lord of the Rings Online was a really good attempt to bring the Lord of the Rings universe to an MMO. Like, just super impressive, I think. what they did. Like, all of the characters kind of made sense in the world. They had loads of really cool, innovative things that weren't really in other MMOs, like the way you could just sit around and play music and you could actually play the notes on your keyboard and stuff. It was very cool. There was a lot of social things about, being able to team up with people who weren't the same level as you. The way they did microtransactions, I really liked, where it was like, you could play it for free, and then if you wanted to, say, go to Moria, you could buy a pack of quests that would take you through Moria, and you get the gear as you go through the quests and stuff like that. But if you didn't want to go through Moria, you could level up in a different zone that you wanted to buy. So maybe you wanted to go to Rivendell, so you're going to buy that set of quests. It was just really cool. Really enjoyed it. Had an absolute blast with that game. I don't know whether any of those people are moving over to this. I'm not really sure. It says that this new MMO is going to feature the beloved stories of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. Apparently they've said it's not tying into Rings of Power or the Peter Jackson thing or anything like that, but it's just going to be kind of a new thing. It's something to do with Embracer Group, that weird company that owns a lot of other companies that bought basically everyone. So it'll be interesting. It does say they're in the early stages of production. I would expect this not to come out for, years and years and years, like 5-6 years probably. It'll be interesting. And this is the second time Amazon have tried this. Like, they did try to make a Lord of the Rings MMO before. That was being made by some Hong Kong company, but they ended up getting bought out by Tencent. And when Tencent bought them, the whole thing got cancelled. And apparently it just got too complicated with Tencent, like, owning that company. So it became a big problem. So this seems like they're just trying to do it again with another company. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. Like I said, New World had a lot going for it. New World was a lot of fun at launch. It'll be interesting to see how this one goes. So that's all of the news. So let's talk about the main topic of today's thing. The main topic. I mean, Mark Kidsey, if you haven't played Lord of the Rings Online, give it a go. It's old and it looks ugly now. But God, that game's fun. Super fun. Combat's really good. So villains in gaming. Just as a slight warning, there will be some slight spoilers for lots of game franchises here. So if you're the sort of person that doesn't want to know who the villain is of games like Portal or System Shock or not the new Zelda, but Zelda in general, we're going to be talking Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original one. We're going to talk about some of those sort of things. So I'm not going to try and spoil any recent games, but we are going to spoil some old games. Maybe I'll talk about Last of Us Part 2 Remastered. So if you don't want to hear any of that stuff, maybe stop listening now. I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye. Have a great time. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe. But let's keep on going. So, someone just said, isn't the Gollum game out this week? I don't know. I don't think so. I don't know. Maybe. I'll Google it while I'm talking about this. Gollum game. I said while I'm talking about this, but it's not really working. I don't know. May 25th, it says. So next week. Next week it's coming out, apparently. There we go. So I was trying to think of the best villains. I was trying to go in my head thinking like, okay, what would be some good villains to talk about? Maybe let's talk about some bad villains. Let's talk about some good villains. And I was like really drawing a blank. When I was thinking about like villains in gaming, a lot of them, Andros and Starwing, Bowser in Mario, Dr. Robotnik and Sonic, they're not really characters. Like, they don't really have anything to them. I know, obviously, since then, in the films and TV shows and cartoons and stuff like that, in Mario and Sonic, they've tried to expand on those characters to make them a bit more interesting. But really, there's not much to them. They're just like, hey, this person is in charge of doing bad things. Go stop them. And like, that's it. Like, that's essentially like the motivation you need. And then even when you get into more recent games, I was thinking like Red Dead Redemption 2, like, who's really the bad guys there? Like, is it the government? Is it Dutch? Is it like what's the bad guy? Anything like, even like the Tomb Raider games, I don't know who the bad guy in any of the Tomb Raider games is. I've played, I think, all of them. Couldn't tell you anything about them. Uncharted, no idea who the bad guy is in any of the Uncharted games. Like, literally no idea. And I'm someone who plays these games caring about story a lot of the time. Like, I want to pay attention to the story. And I'm just like, I honestly can't remember hardly any bad guys at all. I was thinking, the best bad guys I could remember, I was thinking like, GoldenEye, what about Alec Trevelyan? Well, that doesn't really count because that's a movie tie-in, so they kind of had a little bit still from. Zelda, you've got Ganon, and it's like, I've always liked the idea in the Zelda games that you have Ganon as a bad guy, and he is one part of the Triforce, or he has one part of the Triforce. Depending on which game you're playing, it seems a bit ambiguous as to whether he just has it or whether he embodies it. But the idea that you have kind of courage, which is embodied by Link, and then you've got wisdom, which is embodied by Zelda, but then you've got power embodied by Ganon, and they kind of, I like the idea that the three of them are somehow necessary in the world. They're like essential parts of the world. But really, the games don't ever delve into that. That's more like my headcanon. The games don't really ever think of Ganon as being super important. He just goes in and messes stuff up. But it's a cool idea that they're all somehow essential. But Ganon, like, power needs to be locked away. Power needs to be kept in check. The problem is in Zelda, like, they've never needed Ganon. I think that would be a more interesting thing to look at. And then Cortana, like, Cortana and the Halo things, I thought it was really interesting when 343 started turning her into a villain. And it always seemed like that was the way it was going to go. That they talked a lot in the old Halo games about rampancy and the idea that, AIs do go bad. And Cortana had access to information that no other AI did. Cortana had seen things and had interfaced with things that were way beyond human experience. So it's like, if she goes rampant, this is going to kick off. And that seemed like it was quite a promising idea. And then Halo 4 and 5 kind of dropped the ball a little bit, especially Halo 5, with the way Cortana went bad. But, it's like essentially her creating an AI army. Fair enough. Kind of a cool idea, but it just wasn't that much fun in game. And then Halo Infinite was just like, oh yeah, you dealt with her in between the games. Don't worry about that. Don't worry about Cortana anymore. It's like, what? Where did that come from? Which was a shame. So it's like the biggest anticlimax to a villain ever. There was GLaDOS from Portal. GLaDOS is good because GLaDOS is so funny. And, the idea that GLaDOS is just completely focused on her task because she's a robot. So she's completely focused on experiments and not caring about humans, but has that kind of customer service thing of pretending to be nice to you in some ways. But because it's old, like she's old and she's glitching out, she can't keep it up all the time. I think that was quite a cool idea. Obviously not a super deep character, but kind of interesting in its own way. Shodan from System Shock, just the idea of there being a malevolent AI being, and if you're living in a world where everything's controlled by computers, that being a very frightening thing. The idea of, if the computer's out to get you. Obviously heavily inspired by, like, HAL in 2001, but something a bit more demonic, something a bit more evil about Shodan, which I quite liked. I thought about Shepard from Call of Duty. Shepard, the whole thing of him being, I think, and someone I'm sure will correct me if I get this wrong, I think the idea of Shepard is that he is fed up with how him and his soldiers weren't given the kind of respect they were due after various wars, so decided to throw the world into another war in order to kind of increase funding and increase attention and respect on the armed forces. Basically, war was all he knew, so he wanted to create war so he could carry on being the hero. He didn't want to fade into obscurity. That's kind of an interesting idea. I kind of like that. It does seem like in the reboot series, they're maybe not quite going down that path and maybe just making it so he's doing stuff for money. But I kind of like the idea of there being this general who gets obsessed with sort of narcissism and being the hero, being the main character. And, when the world's at a time of peace, everyone forgets about the generals. No one cares about generals. No one cares if you're like a war hero. Especially, I feel like it would have been more interesting if he wasn't American. Because I feel like in America, they do pay a lot of attention to veterans. They do pay a lot of attention to war heroes and stuff like that. Whereas in the UK, we have a much more complicated relationship with the army, where we don't have, like, in modern day conflicts, we don't really have famous soldiers or famous generals or things like that. We know they're doing a job and the job's kind of unpleasant, so we just politely ignore it. But yeah, so like, I think that would be interesting, having like a British general, someone who is like, maybe has seen the way American veterans get put up on a pedestal and is resentful of the way that we don't do that in Britain, and so wanted to create a threat to Britain to make it a bigger deal. That would be maybe a little bit cooler. We'll see. So, and then Samantha. I thought Samantha's actually a good one. Like I said, I was trying really hard to think of good villains. Samantha from Call of Duty Zombies is a pretty good one. of like, for anyone who doesn't know the Call of Duty Zombie story, basically she was the child of a scientist in Germany, and she was living on a base where there were experiments being done, and one of the other scientists ended up using her and her father kind of within the experiments, and it was just sort of like she was a victim of an incredible disregard for humanity, which obviously is something that the Nazis kind of embodied, you know, this idea of not seeing other people as people, not treating them as people. And then she, just by kind of chance, becomes insanely powerful. And it's like, what if that happened? What if someone who was so downtrodden, someone who was like essentially discarded, someone who's thrown away as not mattering, ended up being like the most powerful being in the universe, or one of them? And you know, that's kind of an interesting idea. That's kind of an interesting thing of like, you know, she's not even old enough to really understand what was happening to her when she's a kid. She's not old enough or not wise enough, doesn't have the experience enough to really understand anything beyond very personal grievances. You know, like kids, when they're young especially, their world is very small. Like they only know a handful of people, and those people are everything to them, like super important to them. And the idea of having a kid like that suddenly in charge of something that can end the world is kind of like, that's a cool idea. Like that's an interesting idea. And I know it's not like entirely novel. Obviously, Fear did the same thing, but it's like kind of interesting, the idea of having her being so focused on the few people that she knew that like the rest of the world just suffers as kind of collateral, and she seems barely even aware of it, barely even aware of what she's doing. Like, I think that's pretty cool. I think that's pretty interesting. Um, Callum was just saying in chat, I like GLaDOS and Portal and all that lore. You really have to look at the lore yourself, though, if you want to know. The game doesn't make it obvious. Like, we were talking about that yesterday. Listen to the podcast yesterday if you haven't. But we were talking about that like, it kind of annoys me with lore a little bit sometimes when it's like something core to the story is you have to search for it. Like, you have to find it yourself, especially in a game like Portal where you don't really, you know, it seems like quite a simple, straightforward game. But yeah, so those were villains that I thought were quite good. I was trying to think, like, what other villains do we have? You know, obviously there's some games where, like, I think Last of Us Part 2 does a really good job of not really having many villains. Like, you know, at various times, I'm going to try and talk about this without spoiling too much. But at various times within Last of Us Part 2, your understanding of who is the villain in any situation shifts. And I think that's quite an interesting idea, because that's probably a lot closer to real life. You know, the idea that it's a matter of perspective who the villain is, and it's a matter of kind of context. And, you know, you can make your own judgments about who's in the right or who's in the wrong. But essentially, like, everyone's experience is going to lead them to different conclusions. And like, I think that was really interesting. There's a brilliant moment in Last of Us Part 2. And like I said, I'm avoiding major spoilers, but it's a tiny bit that I just thought was really cool, where early on you have to fight some dogs. And the dogs are really, like, they're a pain. They're like super fast. They can smell you, so a lot of your normal stealth stuff doesn't work. They're like a real pain. So when you take one down, it's like, yeah, I killed that dog. And then later on, you just happen to walk through a place where those same dogs are being kept, and people are playing with them, and people are feeding them, and people are just sort of like, you know, like, people love them. People like calling them by their names and stuff like that. And it's like, you see the kind of human side of like the human relationship with those dogs, and the fact that these dogs have, like, they are just normal dogs. They are good dogs, and they are being trained in a way, I suppose, to defend their owners and stuff like that. And so when you were there, you were the bad guy. Like, you were the villain attacking and killing those dogs. And it's like, I thought that was just such a brilliant thing. It's part of the reason that's like my favorite game of all time, is just how cleverly it sets that up. And it's not unique. Like, there are other games that have done that where the villain just isn't obvious. Heavy Rain did quite a good job of there being, you know, all the way as you play Heavy Rain. For anyone who doesn't know, that's a David Cage Quantum Dream game. Quantic Dream, I think it's called. Where you are playing through like almost a detective story where a kid's gone missing, but the sort of twist is that you don't, like, you play as a whole cast of characters, some of which like suspect each other, one of which is losing his mind and doesn't really know if he did it all the way through. And then it's like, you know, eventually you realize that stuff happen, you find out who the real killer was and stuff like that. The game doesn't leave it completely open-ended. You do definitely find out who is the bad person and what happened. But it's like, kind of, as you're playing that game, it's quite interesting that you don't really know who the villain is in it. And that's, the part of the mystery of it is just like, am I a bad person? And I really like that game. I think that's a really interesting thing. My wife just recently played through Disco Elysium, which is another one of the kind of best games of all time. And that does a really interesting thing, where as you go through it, you kind of realize that there aren't any villains, there's just victims. And some of those victims make life harder for other people, and so become the villains in their sort of personal stories. But it's kind of, no matter what you do, it's like you can't get away from the fact that everyone who's doing something kind of has a reason for why they're doing it as much as you do. And it's like it's a really interesting thing, and the game does a really interesting thing where it's very political, and it like makes you make a lot of decisions about, are you going to side with like fascists or socialists? Are you going to be more communist or more capitalist? Like, are you going to be more like progressive or conservative? There's a lot of those ideas in it, and whatever you pick, like literally whatever you do, it makes fun of it. It makes fun of the hypocrisies in it. It makes fun of the impossible situation you're in. It's like, oh, you think you're a communist, but then you wanted to do this, did you? Like, that's not very communist. Or like, oh, you thought you were a fascist and you thought fascists were good, but then you did this. That's not very fascist of you. It's like, no matter what you do, it's like pointing out the flaws in that and just like being like, hey, well, maybe the world isn't as simple as you thought. And I think that's, to me, a super clever and mature way of approaching this whole idea of villains, is for games to essentially not have a villain, or to have everyone being a bit of the villain. That, I think that's more interesting. And it's something that I've said many, many times, and I'm going to stand by until they finally bloody do it. I know I always say I don't want developers to listen to me, and I don't think developers should listen to me, or writers or whatever. Creative people do what they want. This is the exception. This is something that people should bloody do. Well, it's one of the exceptions. There's a bunch. I'm a massive hypocrite. But one of the big exceptions. Call of Duty needs to make Price a villain. Price and Soap and Ghost in particular, but also to a lesser extent Alejandro and Gaz, but I could imagine them being kind of in between. Alex as well. All of those people are villains, and they should be villains. And one of the games should deal with that. One of the games should deal with the fact that they are war criminals. And they always tease the idea. They always like have a line that they'll put in the trailers where it's like, Price being like, oh, well, sometimes we have to be the bad people. Or like, oh, sometimes, we have to be the ones to do the things that no one else is willing to do. And I know that's not his voice. I can't do a Price voice. Oh, no, I can't do it. It's weird. It's like old man posh voice. But they are villains. Like, they're doing terrible things all the time. They're killing so many people, a lot of which are just like hired guards, and they're just murdering them. Like all the time in countries that we're not at war with. Like, they're not war heroes going into wars and saving the day, which I feel like the original trilogy was a bit more like that. The original Modern Warfare trilogy was a bit more about there being actual wars and these people being instrumental in those wars. Like the new trilogy, like Modern Warfare 2019 and Modern Warfare 2, like so far is very much kind of, hey, there's some sneaky stuff that the government's been involved in. We're going to send these people into various countries to kill a lot of people to tidy it up. And it's like, they're monsters. Like, they're, basically terrorists. So a lot of the stuff that they're doing, they're just horrific. And it's like, they could really, really go hard on that. I would love it if next time they do a Call of Duty Modern Warfare game, if it had, like, people being captured by another country and them being like, oh, what are you going to do? Like, you're going to torture us? You're going to, like, put us up? You're going to execute us? And they're like, no, we're going to take you to court. We're going to put you in public court and expose all of your crimes against humanity. And they just go to The Hague, and there's a public trial, and you see Price and Ghost in that, and maybe there'll be a bit where Farah's like, someone, like Gaz and Farah meet up because they somehow escaped, and Gaz is like, what are we going to do? Are we going to go rescue them? And Farah's like, no, this is what should happen. Like, this is the process. This is what they did. Like, they are paying for their crimes. And then Gaz is like, oh no, I've sort of done some of those crimes too. I've kind of got wrapped up in this. I would like that. I think that would be good, because there's this weird hero worship over Price and Ghost and Soap, and they are just bad people. Like, they're just war criminals. So yeah, they should be villains. I think like that I think it's a much more mature way to take on a topic of having heroes and villains in games, to be like, you can be heroic in a moment, you can be heroic to a person, but you're not just a hero and you're not necessarily just a villain. Like, there's two sides to everything. I really like games that very much humanize the other side. I thought it was like something that was a wasted opportunity in Battlefront 2. So the newer Battlefront 2, it had a campaign where you started playing as an Imperial. So you were playing as like an Imperial, part of this squad that had to do bad things. And the problem, like in the advertising stuff, I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of cool. Like maybe showing where the Imperial, where people who are fighting on the Empire side come from, showing they're not all bad. And it's like, oh no, they immediately, like right at the beginning, see something terrible happening, and they're like, well, we don't want anything to do with this, and then they join the rebels. And it's like, that's exactly what they did with Finn. You know, the idea in Force Awakens, when we had that first trailer, and it was like a stormtrooper, you know, like on the desert, a stormtrooper's going to be the main character. They've got John Boyega to be a stormtrooper. This is going to be super interesting. And it's like, no, get it about half an hour into the film, and he's already been a stormtrooper, 10 minutes into the film. Some weird noise coming from outside. 10 minutes into the film, he's already seen something really, really bad, seen something awful, and then turns against them and becomes a good guy. And it's like, it'd be much more interesting to just follow some people who are working for the Empire, who are essentially good people. Like, you know, they're people who just want stability, law and order and stuff like that, and maybe either aren't really aware of the bigger picture of some of the terrible things the Empire are doing, or see it as kind of a necessary evil. And you got a bit more of that in Andor. I think Andor did a slightly more interesting job with some of that sort of stuff. But yeah, I like the idea of having less kind of cartoonish villains and having a bit more nuance, like a little bit more subtlety. Which, you know, isn't always possible, for sure. Right, we're going to spend a bit of time. We've got 7 minutes left. We're going to read through chat and what chat was saying. So if anyone's got any ideas now of things that they think are villains, anyone that they think are really good villains, then let me know. I'm not going to read stuff out that's super spoilers. Lewis Lord said Handsome Jack in Borderlands. I didn't really play Borderlands 0 very much, so I don't know much about his backstory. Or I think Handsome Jack was he in Legends, as Tales from the Borderlands as well, maybe. I don't really know. I know he was quite funny. Like, it's quite a funny character, but I don't really know why he was doing the things he was doing. So I'll just take your word for it, Lewis. Thundergun said the best villain is surely Mr. X from Resi 2. The fear you had when he's around. That is another way of looking at it. It's like a different perspective. Like, I'm thinking of villains as in like interesting villains because you can like understand where they're coming from or anything. But you could also just think about villains who are good because they're scary. Like villains who you fear. And that's something that video games don't often do very well, where it's like having a villain that you're actually afraid of is quite hard in a video game, because obviously video games are mostly just power fantasies. So it's quite hard to have someone that you're like intimidated by. But that's like the Mr. X idea, or Nemesis, having those kind of villains in the Resident Evil games, Jack in the Resident Evil 7, I think they were very cool villains, where it's like, okay, these are actually quite frightening. Lady Dimitrescu in Village would have been good if she wasn't so bloody easy to beat. Like, the actual fight against Lady Dimitrescu was so boring that it was like, well, not boring, it was exciting, but it was like just so easy. You know, I've managed to do it with just a knife, and I'm not even very good at games. But yeah, it's not spectacular. I do hope that they, you know, carry on with that idea of like, in Resident Evil, the idea of having the unkillable enemy is quite frightening. Alien Isolation, again, good villain. Doesn't need to be explained or anything, just a very frightening presence in the game that you're always concerned about. You know, a game actually that I forgot to talk about that has a good villain? Infamous. Infamous, and again, I don't want to spoil it because I feel like there's a lot of people who didn't play Infamous who should maybe want to go back and play it. So I'm not going to spoil it for you, but Infamous has a really cool villain. I don't know if it's the first or the second game. I think it's maybe the second. No, maybe it's the first game that has the cool villain. But yeah, it's really interesting, and like, you know, you have some cool fights and stuff like that, but really it's like from a story perspective, they're cool, and you get to understand why they're doing what they're doing and everything, and I think that's very cool. Contest Nerd said my favorite PvE game was Anthem. The gameplay and world building design was fantastic. Even the toxicity was nowhere near fair. Wish they made that reboot. Still hope for Anthem 2. Yes, Contest Nerds, 100%. Anthem was another one of those games that was unfairly kind of shat on from above. Anthem was a super fun game. That I think the problem that Anthem had, and a lot of games suffered from this around the same time, is that they were chasing after a live service thing. And if Anthem wasn't seen as a live service game, if you just saw Anthem as a campaign, it was super fun. I really think like what they should have done with Anthem is they should have had a campaign, just the campaign, and then had a separate mode that was like PvE co-op, like horde mode type thing, where you could like try out different suits and upgrade your suits and get stuff like that. Almost like Warframe. Have like a Warframe type thing as the live service part, but then have a campaign that's completely separate to that. But instead, they tried to tie the campaign into this open world microtransaction model, and it just didn't work that well. It's such a shame because it was such a cool game. It was a lot of fun, and it was also advertised badly. I think like when they first showed it off, I remember talking about this on stream. I think that was back in my TP review days. That was before I did Geeky Pastimes, and I was talking about this, saying that like it's not the game you think it is. Like Anthem was showing itself and trying to make out that like you could go anywhere in this huge world, and it was super deep and everything was super detailed and everything. And I was like, I don't think it's going to be that. I think you're going to be fighting in like corridors type situations, and the world where the places where you're talking to NPCs and stuff is going to be very superficial and shallow. And it ended up being true that it's like it was a lot of it was an illusion, and they'd made out that it was going to be. I think people were expecting something like Skyrim or Red Dead 2, something where you could kind of go anywhere within the world, interact with anybody, and have all these cool moments. But it was like the world was much more limited than that. And I think if they'd lent into that limited world and just been like, oh no, this is what it is. This is an action game. It's like, you've got these cool suits, you go away on missions to places and you fight them, then you come back and talk to some NPCs. They could have done a really good job with the game staying as it was pretty much. But they just marked it the wrong way, set people's expectations too high, and it came crashing down. It's another one of those games. There's a long list of games from around the same time period where I genuinely blame online communities for being so toxic about them that kind of killed them. Battlefront 2 is one. We were talking about that the other day. Anthem is another one. Battlefield Hardline is one. Just games that I thought were really, really solid, good games that weren't given a fair chance because people, had in their head that they wanted something different. And it's really annoying that they didn't let the games just be the games that they were. Because those games were so much fun. They were so good. And it's a shame that, we didn't get to see the development on them. We didn't get to see sequels and expansions and patches and stuff. Battlefield Firestorm as well. Amazing. Call of Duty Blackout. Just incredible games. Callum said I quite like Cloud Portal. Oh yeah, The Law. Already read that one. Best villain ever, Sephiroth. I mean, Sephiroth does have the best theme tune ever. Anyone who's got an orchestral song as your theme tune that occasionally has a choir going, Sephiroth. Like, that's amazing. Like, that's just awesome. So cool. But yeah, I mean, Sephiroth does have the whole kind of, he does seem comically evil kind of thing going on, which is a shame. Like, he's very cool looking, and the way he fights is very cool, but it does seem a little bit like, it's just like, okay, he just decided to be evil, so now everything he does is going to be evil, which I'm not a massive fan of. Some people saying about Call of Duty, like Mark Callum and Affa's talking about, COD chasing them down would be fun. Talking about Price and Soap and that lot would be very interesting. Price goes to The Hague. I just think it is the sensible ending to the Call of Duty trilogy, especially the Modern Warfare 2019, Modern Warfare 2 thing. I think it makes sense, and they've been like teasing it in every game. This idea that these people know they're doing the wrong thing, but they think they have to do it. They think they have to do it to save the world or something like that. And it's like, I would just love them to see the consequences for that, of being like, yeah, okay. And maybe, I'm sure Price would be like, well, I don't care that, we're going to prison forever. We still did the right thing. But it's like, everyone else being like, well, no, actually, you could have just, contacted the governments. There could have been diplomatic solutions. We have armies to do this kind of thing. When you wanted to go into Spain to kill a load of people at a fish farm because you thought there might be a rocket there that your government had sold, maybe you should have contacted the Spanish authorities, because they have their own authorities. They don't need a bunch of Americans and Brits to come in and do everything for them. That would have made maybe a bit more sense. Bloody Call of Duty. The Call of Duty heroes are the worst people. Really are. The strongholds and dungeons were fantastic of Anthem. Yeah, they were a lot of fun. Anthem in general was a lot of fun. Anyway, that's going to be it for me today. I will be back. Like I said, I'm going to have a Layers of Fear video going up in not too long, probably. Or I might wait till the afternoon to post it. I don't know. I'll post it at some point today. And then I might stream. I don't really know. If I can find people to play Warzone Ranked, I want to play that. But if I can't find a group of 3 people, maybe I'll play some Lego 2K Drive. Maybe I'll play some Kerbal Space Program. Who knows? We'll see what we're doing. But thank you so much to everyone that's been watching today. I will see you tomorrow for the next one. And goodbye.